Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Langguth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Hello everybody. We got a pretty big name on today's episode. Me and my co-host Johannes Langguth sit together with Geoff Scott, CEO of ASUG, America's SAP Users Group. We kick things off talking about the surprising new tone at Sapphire that feature clarity over hype and a sober look at the uncertain global landscape shaping tech decisions today. Geoff shares his insights on navigating change, from the promise and challenges of AI and cloud to the messy reality of migrating from SAP ECC to SAP S4HANA. We get into why the how of adoption is where the real work happens. Plus, we unpack the evolving role of the enterprise architect, the poor person trying to put together the puzzle with missing pieces and often no clear picture. Finally, Geoff gives us a sneak peek at what ASUG has planned next. Hands-on events, local chapters, and plenty of ways to get practical with new tech. If you want a candid look at where SAP customers are today and how to move forward in these interesting times, this episode is for you. Let's get started.
Looks like there's a little bit of green in there this morning, which is another thing, right? I mean, the markets are moving in a completely, we had a lot of turbulence on Friday, right? When all this kind of broke, and now all of a sudden, the futures, the Dow futures are up 237 points, S&P's up 38 points, and the NASDAQ is up 180. So apparently we're not super worried about war.
Yeah, people get used to all that stuff. But interesting
as
times.
As it sounds.
Interesting times need interesting guests, and definitely we got one here today. Geoff Scott.
Hello.
Great to have you.
Wonderful to be here. It's been a little bit of time, Alexander, since you and I talked.
Far too long.
It's great to be back with you. And you have a new co-host, if I might say.
Absolutely, Mr. Johannes Langguth, sitting in a booth on the airport, postponing his flight in Zurich.
Postponing my flight. Yeah, I rebooked so that I could join you guys. Yes.
One of my favorite towns, Zurich.
Yes.
What a beautiful
and the airport
place.
Is so efficient. So efficient.
As you would expect from the Swiss.
Yes. Like a Swiss watch.
A Swiss watch.
We definitely spent quite some time at the airports in the last months. Sapphire was a huge airport-based and airport-involved event.
For those who don't live in Orlando, which is most of the people there.
Absolutely. So. And to be honest, those, from my opinion, those who live in Florida are probably too old to be interested in what's happening at Sapphire. But that's just my prejudice. So you, of course, can prove me wrong.
You're in Orlando when you can see the condensation dripping down the outside of the doors to the Orange County Convention Center, because the temperature between the outdoors and the indoors are so different that all the moisture just kind of goes down the windows and the doors. Then you're back home.
God made Florida for alligators, not for humans. That's my deep belief.
And manatees.
Oh, as said by two esteemed Europeans. I do think there's a theory that if you live in Florida, and I have some relatives that live in Florida, the heat eventually makes you crazy. And I think there's some truth to that. It eventually kind of makes you go a little loco. So,
your opinion about this year's Sapphire, was it refreshing? If it can be with those hot temperatures.
Wow, this is my 11th Sapphire as the CEO of ASUG. So I've, like many customers, I've seen a lot of Sapphires. So one of the things that, and ASUG annual conference, by the way, because we co-produce it with SAP. One of the things that's always impressed me the most about the customer base is how proud they are about the number of ASUG annual conferences and Sapphires they've attended, right? Some people, this is my 11th, this is my 15th, right? Someone told me that this was like their 20th. We will celebrate a 20-year partnership in 2026 between SAP and ASUG on this amazing event. Just think about that. Just think about the longevity of this event and the huge amount of just commitment that customers have to this ecosystem we call SAP, right? And when I use the word ecosystem, I mean customers, partners, and SAP itself, right? That this is more than just a piece of software that you buy transactionally and just kind of shrug your shoulders at, right? There's so much built around this, and I think that that's an important component of this, which is why when you ask me, what did I take away? We've had years where Sapphires and ASUG annual conferences, there were tons of mountain moving announcements. And this year, I think we achieved a little bit more clarity, which, given kind of where we are in the world right now, it seems like the right answer, right? Let's not, add more, fuel to the proverbial fire. Let's get to clarity. So it was a year, in my opinion, where we talked about clarity, we talked about evolution. Obviously there was a lot on AI, right? And it's hard to go anywhere without discussing AI. And, it's not just an SAP thing. All the other major partners are talking about it. Conversations continued about clean core, which is going to be an absolute necessity to ultimately unlocking the value and the power of AI. And of course, cloud. Where do we want to go with cloud? And, so I thought there was a lot less hype and a lot more realism. I appreciated Christian's comments on the keynote stage. I thought he was very well prepared. I thought he had great commentary to give. I thought he kind of added a soothing vibe to the audience versus kind of going out there and, rumbling things up. I think SAP also acknowledged real implementation challenges. This is, as we said, that if you are a simple business, you probably don't run SAP, right? But if you're a complex business, you do, and there are many complex businesses out there. And I think in order to unlock the future of cloud and AI and a future SaaS-enabled SAP ERP, which I think is an absolute necessity, it's going to require a tremendous amount of change management and moving customers who have been very used to doing things a certain way for a long period of time to a more standard set of business processes, which means the line of business peers ultimately need to be open to change. And these are some of the people that don't necessarily see a benefit of that change because in their view, in their world, everything is just fine. Why should we change? I've been doing it this way for the last 10, 15 years, and I'm very, very happy. So, that to me is like one of the really big things that we don't spend enough time talking about. We talk about the tech a lot, and the tech can certainly help drive this, but ultimately it's going to have to descend into the line of business folks, the folks in the manufacturing facilities, the folks on the front lines, the folks doing customer service, who are going to need to do that work in a different way. And that, I think, is where the hard part happens. That was a long, rambling answer to your very simple question.
No worries, everything's perfect. But I have to jump into that, and maybe Johannes, you can give me later on also your opinion to that. I fully agree that it was not something like also a Sapphire keynote that stopped at the what and gave a little bit of a why, but also, of course, something that acknowledged the how, which is for me as a consultant always very positive, because that's something that we see. The gap is opening, of course. You have on the one hand technology, which is year by year making incredible things possible. And of course, you have something like existing customers who try to gallop behind that and not really sure who is faster, the customers galloping or the technology evolving and so on. Do you think this is something of an acknowledgement that we have to accelerate the how, which is maybe not so sexy, like always every year producing great headlines with great new announcements, but also announce, okay, we have to prove that this is also something where we can bring the horsepower to the street. This is actually usable, and we will roll that out.
I think that in general, all of the technology companies, right? So the hyperscalers, the big technology providers, right? So the whole basket, right, is moving much faster than the customer base can absorb. And I think that distance is widening and not shrinking. And my concern with that is that if we don't figure out a way to shrink it, then at some point in time, some customers might just throw up their hands and say, I can't do this. And so I'm just going to stop trying and I'm just going to wait around. I think, and you wanted to talk today about enterprise architecture, and we'll get there, right? And to me, we're not adding fewer applications to the enterprise portfolio, we're adding more, and more at a fastly increasing rate, right? And so, how do you stitch all that together? And to me, the role of the enterprise technologist today is a harder role than it's ever been. There's more solutions out there. All of the lines of demarcation are incredibly blurry. And so, how do you make these choices? And most enterprises need to make choices, at least at this juncture, that stand the test of time. They can't make jarring changes in short periods of time. So when they make these decisions, they have to make them with a time frame of 5 to 10 to 15 years. Right. And I think, again, we started off our conversation this morning talking about the average longevity of the SAP customer. If we end up in an area where the technology stack can literally be changed out instantly at any one point in time, right? That's going to create a tremendous amount of just turbulence. And I don't think most enterprise customers want turbulence, they want certainty. And so the more that every single technology company is throwing their view and their version of their tech stack at a customer, I don't think that gets customers to jump faster. I think it gets them, more confused. And when they get more confused, they make more conservative decisions, AKA slow it down until we
Yeah.
really understand what's going on. So that to me is a significant part of this. That, they're just, everyone's got their AI solution. Everyone is trying to tell you that their AI solution is the very best. None of them spend a whole lot of time really understanding each other's solutions. So they're just walking all over each other. And it's the customer's responsibility to try to sort all that out. And that's hard.
Yeah. I think you're touching an interesting point, right? Change paralysis. That you have so many changes, so many options to do, and then kind of you stick to what you have. But I want to come back to that comment that you made earlier on change management. Do you think, like, what's your perspective on should there be more responsibility when it comes of SAP and the ecosystem when it comes to implementing change management, getting customers up to speed?
Yes. Yes, I do believe there should be more. And I honestly believe that we spend too much time talking about the tech and not enough time really understanding how do we convince line of business peers that these changes are absolutely essential and necessary. And obviously, that need for change gets less and less the further out you go towards the front lines of where business process is actually happening. Right? These are individuals. I learned something very on in my career as a customer. Right? That we don't. I was sitting in a distribution center and really racking my brain around why this distribution center couldn't just execute this technology better. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching it, and I finally had this kind of realization that the distribution center didn't hire people for their technical skills. They hired them to operate forklift trucks and push pallets onto tractor trailers and get the door closed on the tractor trailer as fast as possible and get it on the road. That was their job, right? If the technology could make that happen faster, great. But they weren't going to spend days and hours trying to figure the tech out. That wasn't their job. So if we as technology professionals didn't make it super simple, it wasn't going to be used. And I don't think that premise has changed. right? There's a tremendous amount of SAP technology happening. And if it happens behind the scenes, great. But when it actually hits the screens of everyone who's trying to get work done, it's got to be flawless. And, and so many ASUG customers have talked to me about, the complexity of changing business processes, not just in one facility, coming back to the complexity of SAP, but they may need to change it in hundreds of facilities across massive geographies, and different languages and different cultures. And that gets hard. So you can't just push this stuff out, this isn't Facebook or this isn't WhatsApp, right? These apps are, what SAP does is far more complex than that. I sometimes wish it was simpler, but I've concluded it isn't, right? If we could make everything a WhatsApp interface and we could do everything through just text messaging, would we live in a better place? But that's not how most of these businesses operate.
A GL accountant communicating via WhatsApp. That's going to be
Yeah.
probably like a very interesting.
Very interesting, terrifying if it might be.
Let me ask a question here. Is it actually that SAP is getting more complicated, or is it that the business question marks are getting more complicated and the technology as such has to deliver answers?
All of it, all the above, or choice E, all of the above, all of it, right? I was having a conversation over the weekend with a dear friend of mine, and we're talking about modern day application development, right? And I grew up at a time where app development was relatively simple. I grew up learning to code in college, right? I'm going to date myself horribly. My first coding was Visual Basic, right? And then my second one was all things COBOL. COBOL. Yeah.
You're
COBOL.
in high demand. You're in high demand.
And, those, I can't believe I'm saying this, those were the simple days. Now today, I decided after Sapphire that I, as the CEO of ASUG, would sign up for a BTP developer account. And over a 3-day holiday weekend, I would see if I could do something in BTP. I spent the first 6 hours, I didn't know what I was doing. And by the way, I still don't know what I'm doing. Just doing basic configuration of the environment. If you think about the app developer of today, right? They have to understand, hyperscaler architectures. If they're probably going to develop this on the cloud, right? Why would you do it anywhere else? You have to understand hyperscaler architectures. You have to understand security. The programming languages are more diverse than ever, right? So just the amount of, you can't just, I don't think today you can walk out and just code something as an individual, right? One person trying to create amazing software. I don't think that happens anymore. Even the software we're generating is factors more complex. So back to your original question, it's all more complex. Business processes are more complex. Despite, where we might be trying to go geopolitically, we're more connected as a society than ever. Things can move around the planet much more. Bits can move around the planet at lightning speed, right? So it's all more connected, which ergo makes it more complicated.
So is it that you found all the answers that the community is looking for?
Oh no, I just always find more questions. I find more questions.
Tell me about this. What are your top 3 still existing questions that are yet up to be answered?
Yeah, I think the first one is AI, right? So I find myself, and I think most of us do, conflicted between being an AI optimist and an AI skeptic. I see some tremendous opportunities with AI. I have a hard time sometimes extending those to the enterprise when I think about what we all spend our careers doing. So, I won't get into that example for a moment. I might come back to that later. Second is clean core. I think essentially we need to think about clean core principles, although I think that's very fuzzy. And then a continuing evolution of cloud and SaaS, right? I do believe that if we as customers want to ultimately take advantage of cloud, of clean core, AI, if the ultimate destination is to move faster and to move faster using AI, then we have to think more consciously about cloud, right? And about SaaS. And so I think about all those three things.
So do you think your community, based on the feedback that you get, is at the moment up to par for what is expected by them in this kind of race? Or do you see we need new initiatives in the area of, be it enterprise architecture, be it more tools to accelerate adoption of the cloud and the new technologies that are up there? Because in the end, we are still, there is a goal of 2027, 2030. And I think that's something that you're also quite often hearing about from your community, that there are still many people looking for their catch, but still already when we look into the hot topics at the moment, it's like we are already all up there, which is not yet the case.
No, in order to achieve this next generation of software, you have to migrate from ECC to S4, right? And that is a substantial undertaking for many, many customers. And part of that, we've had this, 5-10 year debate about blue field, brown field, green field, purple field, orangey, huey field, right? Chartreuse field. And many customers are still grappling with how to migrate to S4. And even when you say migrate to S4, for many of them, that is a cascading migration over a period of time, right? Many of them will recognize that one of the great value drivers of a modern cloud ERP, AKA S4 adoption, is many of them can get their number of ECC environments from crazy numbers down to a select few, right? And so we're all charging down the AI path. And many of these customers are like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. I'm still doing an ECC to S4 migration, and it may take me another 5 years to complete it. Again, coming back to some of the central theorems that we discussed earlier in this conversation, these are complex businesses. They have tons of facilities doing tons of things across multiple geographies and time zones, right? And moving everyone to this new platform takes time and effort. It's not just a click of the fingers, right? And off you go, and everything is great. This takes time. And so many of them need to do a fair amount of enterprise architecture work and cleaning up and simplification in order to even to begin to, figure out how to, comprehend, AI tools.
I mean, since in your role you're representing a lot of SAP customers, I would be very interested to hear you speaking on behalf of them on how does good S/4HANA adoption look like for them, not from an SAP standpoint, right? Like what does that mean? What is good adoption?
Yeah, what is good adoption? And I find myself even conflicted about this. To me, good adoption could mean, in the perfect world, which no one lives in, perfect adoption is if I think about where the proverbial hockey line, skate to where the puck is going, not where it's been, right? It's got to be, public cloud SaaS ERP, which, for many customers sounds great, but some of the functionality may not even be available. So, that's the first kind of disconnect, is that we say that, but the capability isn't even there. So, what do you do? Do you spend a lot of time, rethinking your business processes and getting to business process simplification? Maybe. Or do you just do a lift and shift? And I think that, for some organizations, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. The thing is, get in motion, right? Some of our customers have done massive lift and shifts and literally lifted, as best as they can describe it, bad code into an SAP S4 environment, because the lift and shift is a massive undertaking for them by themselves. And they're going to just declare victory because they got it all there. and they didn't stop their manufacturing, processes from executing. We forget that SAP is integral to many companies' manufacturing processes. And no one wants to get a phone call as a CIO. You don't want to get a phone call that says, hey, congratulations, your implementation's amazing. I haven't been able to produce a single widget out of the plant in the last 3 days, right? You don't want that. So, where do you make this really careful calculation about trying to move things without causing massive disruption to the very fabric of what your business is supposed to do? So, for some of them, I think it's okay to do a lift and shift, right? For some of them, I think if you can do it, if you're simpler and you can really get back to greenfield, go for it. So I hate to not give you a specific answer, but I don't think that there's a one size fits all solution to this. And it also comes down to the culture of your organization. If your organization is highly conservative and very careful and cautious, a lift and shift might be a safer route. If you're more, adventuresome and wanting to be way out in front, maybe there are some more, aggressive strategies you could deploy. But all with be careful and be prudent. No one wants to be that Monday morning person that says, hey, we migrated and everything went bananas, right? And now we're going to spend the next, 2 to 3 months unwinding the damage we created.
On that, I got 2 points where I want to hear your opinion. The one thing is when you say, okay, there are some customers who may be in a position that a lift and shift is fine for them, yeah, because probably they would not be able to do more, and so while others make a greenfield and go full on, let's get the best out of that. We have still, in many cases, many areas, the assumption that everybody has the same level of performance when he has adopted a certain technology, and probably we should see organizations more as humans, because not everybody of us will be able to be, let's say, a full-fledged athlete. Yeah, there will be some folks who wear a running shoe and win probably Olympic gold medals. Others will just use the running shoe for staying healthy. Others will probably just to try the minimum of keeping themselves in shape. Yeah, that's the one thing. The other thing concerning the adoption, maybe the issue is also there because there is not really one opinion what actually adoption means. Because when you look, for example, I read yesterday an article and a post on LinkedIn, for example, about a Gartner statement that the sales of RISE and so on may go down, which some, of course, interpret as, okay, the adoption, since so many are still not yet on S/4HANA, the adoption is slowing down. Yeah, what is adoption? Some may see it as selling, some may see it as customer success. Yeah, so considering that case, for example, from the Gartner topic, where somebody did not see that, of course, it may be that in Europe, certain sales of RISE may not be in that same value rising as it was before, because it has been sold at so many customers who are yet to implement it or are yet in the way to implement it. Are we here in so many different opinions about what actually adoption means that it's impossible to get a clear picture about how good the adoption actually is?
Yeah, it's a great question. We, from an ASUG perspective, in the research we're doing, do not see any slowdown in S4 adoption, right? So, to me, when we get into conversations about rise or grow, those are methods and mechanisms to get to an end state. I don't necessarily pay a lot of attention to what words are being used. I am more interested in hearing how customers are moving to the next generation of software in order to unlock the ability to drive better outcomes, right? Ultimately, what the ASUG board, which are 14 CIOs, remind me over and over again, is this is supposed to be about business outcomes, right? That the technology is an enabler and a catalyst for an organization to achieve business outcomes. It is not the end of itself. It's a means to an end, which meaning that the organizations need to use technology in order to achieve more consistent, more efficient outcomes. I believe that, running a modern enterprise on an old technology is a recipe for disaster. In today's world, where look at the geopolitical risk. We got our first taste of this, during COVID times when supply chains kind of went haywire, and we started to learn that the world is a very dynamic place, and interruption happens when you least expect it and in places that you don't. And then, you kind of had a couple years later, we had the whole Suez Canal issue happen. And now we're decided to kind of go bananas around tariffs, right? And that is again another set of, unplanned interruption. So I think we need better software that can help to create consistency out of chaos. If I were a CIO today versus a CEO, so I'll talk from a CIO perspective, I would like my technology investments to be able to keep the business running regardless of the risks that are being thrown at it, which I can't possibly predict. If I'm a CEO, I would like to make sure that my technology can adapt quickly to the very fast moving, cultures of this planet so that I can keep the business running regardless of the risks that are thrown at it. Most organizations never contemplated what the changing, well, by the day, tariffs were going to do to their businesses. And, we talked a little bit earlier about, the challenge of uncertainty, and uncertainty doesn't drive rapid change. It drives everyone to step back and wait and watch and make very careful plans. We as a species do not run head first into danger. Most of us don't. Most of us turn around and run the other way, and we go and hide until the danger has passed and we can assess what's going on and then make decisions. That's a culture, and that's in our species since the dawn of time, right? And so that's how we operate as human beings, right? The book Sapiens talks about this, right? We don't run towards danger. At least most of us don't. Maybe 5 or 10% of us do. The most of us run the other way. So in uncertain times, we don't jump in, we jump out. And we need technology that can help create certainty out of uncertain times. And to the extent that we're using more tech than ever before, our application portfolios are bigger than ever. We're not creating cohesion. We're creating chaos.
Since I'm speaking here to two former CIOs, yeah, Johannes, you used to be one. Geoff, you used to be one for decades. Concerning those people who run away from danger. I'm 22
years old. Sorry.
Concerning those people running away from danger, we had now this kind of announcement, which was coming over certain channels in the last weeks of a certain company promising, I take over the maintenance of your old ECC systems and I guarantee to do it till 2040. How do you, as CIOs, react to that kind of offer? Is it a false friend offer, or is it something that you say maybe something for some of your clientele that's actually not too uninteresting?
Alex, can I?
You can start.
Let me ask a question back. Do you want to solve the problems that you're confronted with these days? Are you be able to solve these problems with the technology that you just mentioned? Is it solvable with ECC? And I think that is the key question that a CIO should ask him or herself when confronted with this decision. So you don't hear me saying, no, it's please do X or Y, because that is not I don't think that is a fair statement. But I think the question that I would ask myself, can I provide the business impact and the values, we spoke about that earlier. Can I provide that with that technology? There might be cases, probably, I don't know. But I think especially the demand for new capabilities, AI capabilities, that would probably require investing into the shift towards modern technologies. So there is no black and or white answer to that, to be honest. Even though I should probably say there is only one answer to it, but it's not, in my opinion.
Geoff, do you have one answer?
I don't. I would say
Thank you.
as a tactical answer to specific business problems that you might be facing, I think those solutions have merit. And in my career as a CIO, I have used them in very specific ways to address specific issues of timing and risk, right? As an overall strategy, because I want to avoid migrating to a later set of software that can better drive business outcomes. No, I don't think that's an answer. And I think the longer you do that, the more danger you present to your business and it's being unable to recover. And here's the other thing, right? That I think about. Long gone are the days where technology and this stuff could be done by people wandering around in white lab coats in a data center in a bunker somewhere in a basement of your facility, right? Technology is present everywhere, right? I mean, we use it every day in our personal lives. We all wander around with iPhones. We're all constantly, looking at things. I was in Europe a week ago, right? And my iPhone was always in my hands. It was navigating me around the streets of Paris. It was helping me translate a language that I took in high school that I don't remember. I'm using this device all the time. This technology is now part of what we do. I'm buying merchandise online and having it shipped to my home. I don't buy it in Paris anymore. I buy it online and have it shipped to my home, so it's waiting for me when I return. The capability we couldn't do 15 years ago. And now it's just, it's completely transparent. So, technology is at the center of everything we do. And to act like, we can back up the clock 15 years and pretend we live in a different era, I think is foolhardy. Now, so as a strategy, I think this is a bad idea. If tactically you need to get some certain things done and you need a short-term fix, sure. But every month that goes by, the risk goes higher, right? And when I use these services, I use them because if something went really, really wrong, I was hopeful that they could solve it. As a general business practice, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't.
And especially if somebody has, and S4HANA is there 10 years now, has not yet found their case because probably he had chosen the wrong partners or chosen the wrong approaches to it and has not yet found his case. I'm not really sure if for example, those person is helped by doing that. And we, of course, there are two major factors which contribute, in my opinion, to that. Is the first thing is we should ask ourselves, do we think and we've talked about the challenges that we are facing now in the 21st century. Do we think we can face those challenges with technology 4 years old, more or less? Do we think that these are the right tools? And the other question is those investments that are trying to keep us away, that kind of sunk cost bias, money we paid for that. Did we do this in the last years to make ECC function better for us, or was it just keep the lights on activities so that ECC is still actually able to cope with the day-to-day challenges that we are doing? And as such, this is not really interesting, an investment to the future, but more or less blood transfusion.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more interest in business cases popping up. And I'm not surprised by it because here's how I think about what's happening. It's an adoption curve, right? So early adopters came through and said, I get it. This makes sense. Let's go, right? The second phase of adoption kind of rolled through. And a lot of this, I think, was around either organizations that recognized that their current ERP environment and business processes were radically out of sync with how they were doing business today. So you had those individuals who kind of got it and said, wow, we're doing this thing in a the ERP is creating more problems than it's solving. So let's get this done. Right. And it was obvious to everyone that this was the issue. Also in that was a tremendous amount of M&A happening, where you had two organizations come together and someone needed to make a decision about which technology was going to be the predominant one. And you saw a lot of movement around that. And then you get to this next and final group of folks who don't have any of that going on. The business is stable, the business is okay, and now they've got to make a technology shift, and they're kind of trying to figure out how to do it. Now, in that regard, I do believe underneath the surface of that, there's lots of things that are misfiring that CIO and technology team need to elevate and get the rest of the leadership team to understand the risks and get them to buy in. And that to me is about relationship development and not just about technology. So as a CIO, you need to be spending time with your line of business peers, understanding their challenges and constraints, and working to find better technology solutions. Otherwise, they'll just do it around you. And if that's been happening, then over time, you're slowly diluting your ability to execute.
Now enter the enterprise architect, who's seen in many cases.
Weren't they part of this? Enter the enterprise architect. Shouldn't they have been part of this and central this from the very beginning, Alex?
They should
design
it, yeah.
They should design it. Yeah. But the question is, the enterprise architect now is seen as the golden role, who's expected to solve all these kinds of problems and bring speed and a moment into these initiatives again. Do you think that probably the enterprise architecture is asked too much in that case? Is he able to actually do what's expected by him with the tools he is given already at the moment? Or do you think we have to do enterprise architectures of this world a favor and enable them to do ABC?
Oh, what a great question. So we are relaunching in ASUG in North America, our enterprise architect community. And the first question and the first challenge I've given to my team is I don't want this to be a conversation about tools. Tools are a mechanism to get to an outcome. What is the modern practice of enterprise architecture? Right? What exactly does it mean to be an enterprise architect? What do these jobs look like? And then there's more interest in enterprise architecture than I've ever seen before. Some of it generated by a lot of announcements coming out of SAP, right? And my basic question is, great, I love all these announcements. What are these people supposed to do, right? What is their job? What is the delineation between a high-performing enterprise architect and a medium to low performing enterprise architect? And some of those questions to me have not been answered. And we just keep throwing tools at people. So it's like you wandering into your backyard and someone says hammer, and they hand you a hammer. And you go, okay, thanks for the hammer. And then they hand you a screwdriver. And you go, oh, thanks for the screwdriver. And then they hand you some nails. And you go, thanks for that too. And then you just gotta say, so what am I supposed to be doing with all of this? And they're like, I don't know. So like, well, thanks for the hammer, thanks for the screwdriver and the nails. You don't know what I'm supposed to be building. So to me, what we're really, really good at is throwing all these tools at folks without answering the question, what are you supposed to do with them? And that to me is where I want the community to begin. What is the notion of best practices around enterprise architecture? And yes, I do believe that there is a place, a very important place for Signavio, for Lean IX, for those things, 100%. But I don't want the enterprise architecture community just to be about how to use software. I want it to be about how do you drive an outcome, and what is the outcome you're supposed to be driving, and how does that help you drive better business cases? How does it help you have better conversations with your line of business peers, your CIOs, your CFOs, your boards, right? How does that all matriculate up? And that's the conversation I really want to have, and what we're trying to have from an ASUG perspective.
I think there is a common misperception that enterprise architecture are always these hardcore technical people that, I don't know, know the nitty-gritty details of each and every single code line. And I think that's part of the problem, at least not so much in the US probably, but especially in Europe. A lot of people think this is a full-blown technical role, but from a real EA standpoint, a good enterprise architect actually speaks the business language, right?
Yeah.
Kind of in a forward deployed way, understands what is coming. I keep saying to my teams, it's kind of the EA of the 21st century has to build intent-driven architectures. You have to know where things are moving. You have to anticipate. And I think that's a big effort that we as SAP, but overall as the community needs to make to provide clarity on that EAs are not only a technical risk, there is a
It
technical
can't
notion
be.
in it. But there is also business sentiment in it, right? You have
Oh,
to
100%.
understand your business.
And I think the role of the enterprise architect is more complex than ever because the enterprise portfolio is more complex than ever, right? So to me, an enterprise architect ultimately is a person who sits down and tries to fit a puzzle together.
Yeah.
And the analogy I've used, right, is that when we typically work on puzzles, jigsaw puzzles, you have a picture, right? And you try to build the picture from the puzzle, right? You know, some people like to be incredibly daring and try to do jigsaw puzzles with no picture. Okay, great. Well, fine, good, but that'll take you 2 or 3 times as long, right? If you don't have the picture, Johannes, this is your point. Then what puzzle are you trying to solve for? And what I think is so hard about being an enterprise architect is you get all of these. Someone comes by, they don't give you the picture, and they give you X number of puzzle pieces, and you sit there and you're mightily trying to put them together, and you're trying to kind of figure it out. I think I got this,
Yeah.
and then they drop more puzzle pieces on top of you. Go, here's some more puzzle pieces, and you go, what are these? And the person says puzzle pieces, and you say, so are they for this puzzle or another puzzle? What's the picture? And they go, I don't know. They're just puzzle pieces. And you're like,
We just
great.
found them.
We just found them. And I have no idea if they fit or don't fit. And you're like, so
Yeah.
you want me to sit here again and continue my puzzle with pieces I don't even know what they are, and I have no picture.
Yeah.
And the problem is, this isn't just a picture you take a snapshot of, and it's a picture that also is evolving every single day, right? Every single day it's evolving. And the enterprise architect is also not responsible for procurement. So you also have the nasty outcome that people are buying technology around you, and they're going to show up in your teams one day and say, hey, I bought this really cool thing, integrate it. And you're like, what'd you buy? And they're like, I bought this. And you're like, well, but some of that already exists. Well, I don't like that. So we're now going to use this, integrate it. And you're like, how do you want me to integrate it? Right.
Yeah.
And now we start a whole nother dialogue.
Yeah. So I think to stay in that analogy, I think the EA the enterprise architect would be the person that's not only putting the puzzle together, but it's actually also drawing the target puzzle picture. Let's put it like this.
As
I like
best
the
they
analogy, by the
can,
way.
as best they can at that
Yeah.
point in time, with lots of other people acting like they know more than they do, and making decisions around them. And it makes the role fascinating and makes it hard, really hard.
Definitely.
So I think that these are amazing individuals, that we owe them a debt of gratitude, and we need to help them really understand their role. And their role just can't be playing cleanup for all the other enterprise messes that we're creating, which I think sometimes is what this individual is left with. It's like, we don't know what else to do. Where's the enterprise architect?
Figure it out.
Mess in aisle 3. Go figure it out.
Yeah.
Taking a look at the watch, everybody of you has to run now. Geoff, since Sapphire is now a thing of the past, at least for 2025, what is ASUG up to for the next 6 months? Definitely not vacation, I guess.
No, definitely not vacation, although many of us would like that to be the case. Sapphire and ASUG Annual Conference is always a great strategy event. We talk about concepts. We think about where we're going long term. What I like is in the fall, we tend to produce a tremendous amount of more hands-on events. So in the fall, we'll be doing ASUG Tech Connect in Louisville, Kentucky in November. And I think about what DSAG does in their technology days, which always happen in the early part of the year, right? These are where you go hands-on. I think we talk about a lot of these technologies. I like to see people actually put them to practice. And so ASUG Tech Connect, Tech Ed, which will be in Europe this fall, are all about getting hands-on. And I think we all need to be more hands-on with these tools. There's a tremendous amount of really good things happening. I think about Cloud ALM. I think about, where all of these other tools are going. And I think that we all need to get a little bit hands-on to figure out how to use them. We also have, some industry events occurring. So we're doing SAP for utilities. We have ASUG best practices. And by the way, in between all those, we have 39 chapters that meet 3 to 4 times a year within a driving distance of most people's homes. Get out there and spend some time with your local community, really understanding what everyone's doing on a local basis. I think that the chapter conversations are an underappreciated asset, and we can always learn a ton from there, especially for folks who don't typically get the budget to travel.
And I think what we also should add to that is the general message out there. Become an ASUG member. I'm an ASUG member, and I really got tremendous value out of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on, right? Listen to these podcasts. Listen to ASUG Talks, our flagship podcast. One of the things that to me is clear is education is key. We are moving really, really fast. And the more we spend time listening to each other and trying to understand this, the better off we will be, and the more likelihood we will get to success. And that happens through community.
And that's part of change management. Touching based on what you said earlier, right? It's crucial to make sure the gap's closing and not getting wider.
100%.
Wonderful.
What a great conversation. Thank you both.
Jeff,
thank you.
I definitely not let you go. We will hear us again.
You always say that.
I always say that, and I keep my promise. Promise. Yeah.
You do. Everyone have a safe travel, safe summer. And
same to
Alex, you always know whenever you want me to be a guest on your amazing podcast, you've got me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. Be safe.
Have a great day.
Thank you.